Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. 5 most important questions for this Michigan program heading into 2024. And Dill, I think what's kind of been so fun for us Michigan fans during the offseason is you go back 12 months ago, I don't think we had a single question mark about this Michigan team heading into 2023. A lot of the boxes were checked. They returned pretty much that whole roster from the 2022 season. I think the big question was, were they good enough to get it done? They answered that question with a yes. I think adding into 2024, what's been so fascinating to talk about this Michigan team is there's a lot of question marks within this Michigan program heading into 2024. And I say question marks, not necessarily saying there's not answers. We're going to answer some of these question marks, but there's a lot more unknowns in terms of this Michigan team and what it's going to look like in 2024. Excited to get into this conversation. Before we do, and as always, just want to say thank you to you guys and to the Michigan fans. It's been just an absolute blast talking this program. Many of you guys know the boys are big Michigan fans, and the amount of support the Michigan fans have shown the fellas, it truly does mean a lot. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Much more importantly, would love to hear some answers from you guys in the comment section. A lot of these questions that we're going to talk about have a lot of different kind of answers. Would love to hear from you guys. We always learn a ton from you guys in the comment section. And Dill, without further ado, this was your number one question. And I think it's a really unique question. And I think a lot of times when you're doing some of this offseason talk, you just focus on the talent on the roster. You look back at what made Michigan so special in 2023. Yes, it was a very talented roster that sent a ton of guys to the NFL. What kind of made them special, and I think what led them to a national championship, was the leaders and culture that was kind of established over the last couple of years. Now, with a lot of those guys, the Blake Corums, the J.J. McCarthy's, moving on to the NFL, I think one of the more intriguing questions are who are going to be the leaders for this Michigan program in the 2024 year. I'll kick it to you. Who are the guys in the locker room that the players are going to be looking at?
I mean, I think the big thing, frankly, is all the high impact guys who should have had to stay, if you will. They're all back. Will Johnson, Mason Graham, Colson Loveland, Kenny Grant, like all the horses for the most part are back. It's not like there was a whole ton of turnover when the coaching staff left. And I think, again, I do think a lot of guys are getting a lot of credit in that coaching staff. Jim, Ben Herbert, guys who are there, and they deserve their share of it. But they were also there when Michigan couldn't get over the hump. I think when you saw Mike Sanderson come in, JJ, Blake, those guys, I mean, at the end of the day, it was them. It was them that got them over the hump, their ability to, again, not flinch in big moments and play really, really good. Or if Ohio State was kind of beating up on Michigan a little bit in 2022, JJ willing that team, making the plays he had to make. I think those were the unique things that took Michigan from being a good Big Ten team to being a national championship team. And I think the big thing for me is the guys who were under those guys, if you will, and making big impact plays last year are all back. And I just think they should have no problem filling into those shoes and being the guys.
You're kind of like passing the torch. And again, what made Michigan special in 2023 was all the star players were also the leaders, right? Blake Corum, J.J. McCarthy, those guys were the heartbeat of this Michigan team. You look at a lot of other teams that were arguably maybe more talented than Michigan. Some of the star players weren't necessarily the leaders in that locker room. You look at 2024, the leadership might look a little bit different. There are certain guys that are more vocal than others, but you make no mistake about it. I mean, Will Johnson, Colson Loveland, Mason Graham, those are the guys that I think Michigan turns to. I would probably offer a few other names that you might be sleeping on. Donnie Edwards, going into year 4, kind of being the guy in that backfield. I think he's certainly a guy that takes a leadership role. And I'd probably say, man, like someone like Quentin Johnson, who kind of reminds you like Mikey Bear. Was he the most talented player? Is he going to be the most talented player on this Michigan defense? No, probably not. You talk about a guy that has just stuck with this program, has done everything this coaching staff has ever asked, whether it's special teams, whether it's playing in a reserve role. Whenever he has the chance to play, he plays at a really high level. So Quentin Johnson would be another guy. I got one other guy. Kalel Mullings. Talk about a guy that switched positions and now I think is going to be a really good running back in 2024. That's another guy that has just stuck it out with this program, has done everything that coaching staff has asked for. You talk about earning respect in the locker room, making a position change and kind of emerging as a guy to lean on. Kalel Mullings is another one of those guys I would shout out. I think,
on that front, you could probably list a handful of offensive linemen too, guys who, again, have not gotten their shot to get on the field, but El Hadi, Crippen, obviously those type of Raheem Anderson, like guys who, again, stuck it out, are there, and now it's their time to shine. And I'd love to see them all have big years and be kind of like what Michigan's offensive line was last year with Zinner, Keegan, those guys who guys who you look to like this was part of the turnaround.
And all guys who have been within this program. I mean, like guys like El-Hadi and Raheem Anderson and Greg Crippen, they're not necessarily names known by outsiders of this Michigan program, but they're guys that are now going into year 4 within this college football team. That means something. Going to number 2, now I personally think, and I'm kind of a nerd like that, what's the most fascinating question, I think, is what does this offense look like? And you obviously are replacing J.J. McCarthy, and I think the beginning of this conversation is it depends on who's starting at the quarterback spot. Let's first talk about Alex Orji. If Alex Orji starts for this Michigan offense, you are going to see them. Well, Michigan's been leaning into the run game. That's certainly no secret. You're going to see Michigan even lean in more to the run game. And I think it's going to look a little bit different. One, I think you're going to see the quarterback be much more involved in the rushing attack. You look at J.J. McCarthy, he had the athleticism to be involved in the quarterback run game. At certain points, Michigan asked him to be involved, but not so much because, one, you want to keep J.J. McCarthy healthy. He doesn't have the biggest frame like Alex Orji does. You look at Alex Orji, you just look at him in the offseason workouts. We're not worried about the durability of Alex Orji. We're probably worried about the durability of the linebackers trying to tackle Alex Orji a little bit more. Dill, if Alex Orji is starting quarterback, I think you're going to see a lot of 2 running back sets with Alex Orji in the backfield. You're going to have 3 elite ball carriers in the backfield, and Michigan is going to get really creative in terms of how they decide to attack opposing defenses in this rush game. And you look at Donnie Edwards, Kalel Mullings, Alex Orji, just gives you so many different options in terms of how we want to run the football at opposing defenses. That's kind of what I look for Michigan if Alex Orji is your starting guy.
Yeah, I almost think like when you have a guy like Orji, you almost look to like the Chip Kelly offenses with UCLA and DTR and how creative he was able to use DTR in that rushing attack. I think, again, when you have a guy like Orji who can carry the ball 10 plus times, no problem. You don't need to worry about injuries, none of that. I think, again, you kind of said it. You got to have him very much involved, not just as like a change of pace, but almost like the focal point, or you almost should have like 3 focal points in my mind. I don't mind the idea of having 2 back sets, being able to run triple options, like all of it. I think when you have that type of weaponry in your backfield, especially because you have guys who do different things. I mean, Donovan Edwards is much more that big playmaker, does really well in space. If he gets a crack, he can take it all the way. Kalel Mullings can pound it a little bit more. Orji can certainly pound it. I think you have a unique set of skill sets, and I'd really like to see them do a good job maximizing all 3, and I wouldn't mind seeing them all 3 together.
Need 2 running back sets for this Michigan program in 2024. Now, you use the DTR comparison. I'd probably lean more into the Jalen Milroe comp. And the Milroe-Orji comp, I think it's there. Like you look at, and when Alabama kind of found their stride on offense, it started when they leaned in to what Jalen Milroe could do. You look at Alex Orji, he's got a little bit of a different skill set. You don't want to run an offense that doesn't incorporate what Alex Orji does best. So when you're designing this offense, if Alex Orji is going to be your guy, you got to lean into those traits. I think number 2, what if Jack Tuttle, Davis Warren kind of emerges as your starting quarterback? You're going to see much more of a point guard of the offense vibe from Michigan. And you've seen that in the past. That you're not going to ask Jack Tuttle or Davis Warren to be Heisman caliber quarterbacks, but you're going to ask them to manage the game, not turn the football over, and just be that methodical offense that we're all used to seeing. Now, from a Michigan fan's perspective, at least my perspective, I prefer Orji because I think the ceiling is just higher. You ask me what the best version is of this Michigan offense, it's if Alex Orji puts it together and emerges as your starting quarterback. That being said, I think we know we can win a lot of games with Jack Tuttle or Davis Warren as well. Dill, going into number 3, a fascinating question. This is the question I want to hear from the Michigan fans, and you could pull 100 Michigan fans and get 100 different answers. Dill, I'll start with this. Your top 2 leading receivers for this Michigan program in 2024.
I think Loveland's going to be 1, and I think Tyler Morris is 2. I think Tyler Morris, it's almost like frustrates me that he didn't play more last year. I thought when he got his shots, played really, really well, and I think he's like that true guy who can create space, runs really good routes, and I think has a little bit more athletic juice than a lot of Michigan fans might think. I think it's going to be those two. I don't even need to say anything about Loveland. We all know he's the best tight end in the game. But I think of the receivers, I think Tyler Moore is going to be the guy.
Loveland's my answer for 1-2. And again, you're going to see a lot of outsiders from this Michigan program take shots at the Michigan wide receiver room. And I think a lot of Michigan fans say, one, we kind of like the young talent that we have coming into 2024. But I think more importantly, we all know where this passing attack goes through. It goes through the tight ends. And Colston Loveland's the best one in the country. Loveland's one for me. My number 2 is going to be Samaj Morgan. And I think it's just because of how many different ways you can get him involved in this offense. I mean, whether it's screens, whether it's some end arounds that, okay, might not count for receiving yards. I think Samaj Morgan has so much juice with the football in his hands. And you look at an inexperienced quarterback that Michigan's going to have, regardless of who it's going to be, you want some easy access throws. Samaj Morgan is going to be your guy with those easy access throws. So I'm going Samaj Morgan there, Dill. Leading rusher. This is another interesting conversation. I have 3 names written down. I'll ask you first your top 2 rushers for this Michigan offense.
I wonder who those 3 names are going to be, but I'll go Dono and I'm going to go Orji. I think Orji is going to be the second leading rusher. I think he'll be well over 500 yards. I think he'll be close to 6-7 if he is the starter. So I'll go with those 2. I think Donovan's still going to be the bell cow. I hope he runs the way he did in that spring game. And when you see it at times where the contact balance is good, running hard through contact, some of those things that have been inconsistent in his career, I'd say up till now. But again, just his ability to hit those big plays. I think Michigan needs him. He's got to get a lot of touches. And then I think the other side is Orji. I think they're going to run him a lot if he's the quarterback.
They're going to lean 100%. I'm going to go Kalel Mullings number 1. This will be a hot take for a lot of Michigan fans. The Michigan fans who've been rocking with the fellas for the last couple months, you guys kind of know Kalel Mullings is my guy. Go back to last year. He didn't get a ton of opportunities, but when he did, he was so good. I mean, 6.2 yards per carry, over 4 yards per carry after contact. And then why go with Kalel Mullings over Donovan Edwards? I think they probably both go over 500 yards at the very least. If Alex Orji is starting quarterback, you're going to see a lot of physicality in the run game. I think Kalel Mullings is the best suited running back to do that. Now, you look at Michigan and the dedication they have to be staying on schedule, making sure we're not in third and long situations. Kalel Mullings is the guy that keeps you on schedule. And Kalel Mullings having more opportunity, like that's just one of those running backs that teams are not going to want to tackle 20-plus times a game. I hope Sherrone Moore makes some of these Big Ten teams tackle Kalel Mullings 20-plus times a game. He's a guy that's going to get better as he gets more carries. Give me Kalel Mullings, massive breakout year, leading this team in rushing. Donovan Edwards coming in at number 2. Number 4, where do the explosive plays come from, right? You look at last year, especially in the passing attack, J.J. McCarthy's average depth of target was 9.4 yards down the field. They asked J.J. to push the ball down the field pretty consistently when we decided to drop back and pass. You have a new quarterback coming in. I personally think it's going to be Alex Orji, but regardless of who it is, Davis Warren, Jack Tuttle, Dill, it's going to be a different look in terms of the passing attack and how we manufacture explosive plays. I think it's going to be closer to kind of what Oregon did with Bo Nix last year. You look at Bo Nix, threw for over 4,000 yards. His average depth of target was only 6.4 yards down the field. I mean, Bo Nix was a guy that was getting the ball out early on time to his playmakers in space and then letting them operate after the catch. Oregon was able to manufacture 3,000 yards after the catch last year. And so I look at this Michigan quarterback room and say, all right, the top end arm talent is probably taking a step back as JJ goes to the NFL. I think you're going to lean on some of those quick games. And so you ask me where the explosive plays come from for this Michigan offense. It's going to be yards after the catch. Guys like Tyler Morrison, Samaj Morgan, and Donnie Edwards out of the backfield, getting the football in space and letting them operate with the football in their hands. I think that's how Michigan manufactures these explosive plays in 2024.
And that'll be the question. I mean, obviously, even last year, you didn't really have enough of it, frankly. And I get that the defense could carry it, and Blake Corum was just so good at churning yards out, so they didn't necessarily need to rely on explosiveness. But I certainly don't think it would have hurt that offense to have a little bit more potential to hit big plays. And aside from Dono, it really wasn't a ton. So I am kind of interested in it. Frankly, I think your recipe, I think it does rely on the fact that you need to have somebody who can get downfield a little bit at that wide receiver spot, whether it's going to be Morris, whether it even is a guy like a Marion Walker who has the athletic profile, at least you're kind of looking for a vertical threat. I think that allows you to hit those big plays more consistently underneath when you can open up some space, which I think will be, frankly, the key challenge Michigan will face this year is how can they create space in this offense? How can they get the ball down the field to open up everything else underneath and in the run game?
Yeah, you look at you are right. Like you need somebody because if you're trying to get the football to your players in space, you gotta be able to manufacture that space. You gotta have a wide receiver that makes defenses respect what you can do down the field. Marion Walker is a really interesting cat to keep an eye on, right? This is a guy that's big frame that can absolutely burn in a straight line. And one other thing I'd say, and we've been banging the table for quote unquote explosive plays for Michigan, it's just not something that's that important to this Michigan team. I mean, you saw them win a lot of football games, not necessarily generating a ton of explosives. Why is that? The recipe is pretty clear. We're going to play really, really good defense. We're going to be methodical on offense. We're going to keep opposing offenses off the field, keep defenses on the field, and kind of just be, I think Joe Class says it, the boa constrictor model for Michigan. That's kind of their recipe. And we saw the recipe work in 2023. I don't think the recipe is going to change much in 2024. Yes, you want to manufacture explosive plays when the opportunity presents itself. This is not a Michigan team that is reliant on hitting explosive plays. Going to number 5, and I think another fascinating question. Now, before we move on to the defense, a lot of people say, why aren't you talking about the offensive line? I'm not worried about the offensive line. No. You look at this offensive line, a lot of these guys have been in the system for 3+ years. I think a lot of outsiders have a lot of question marks about the offensive line. I think us Michigan fans say, we're feeling pretty good about what the offensive line is. Let's get into this last conversation, and that is how the secondary plays out. One, we know Wink Martindale, similar to Jesse Minter and Mike McDonald, is going to get really creative in terms of the looks and packages that opposing offenses see. I look at the secondary and say there are 7-8 names that really intrigue me. I think the question is, what does this rotation look like? I'll give you the first crack at it. Your 2 starting cornerbacks, your nickel, your 2 safeties. Who you got?
So I think the starting 2 are going to be Hill and Will Johnson, obviously. Jair Hill, I'm sure, is going to have a bit of a battle with Amir Hall and some of these other guys, but I do think at the end of the day, he is going to take that room. I got my safeties, Makari Page. No doubt he's going to be the guy in that room now. And I think Mangum's going to be the other one. I think those two complement each other really, really well with Mangum's ability to play more of that free safety role and allow Makari, frankly, to play in the box. And then at the nickel, I think it's going to be Zeke Berry. I think the one guy who's really interesting and where he kind of fits in is Jaden McBurrows. I kind of watch – when I go back and watch games from last year that he played in, I mean, he does really have some good instincts in terms of what Michigan's doing. Seems like he's in the right place a lot, can tackle well. He's the one I'm kind of looking forward to seeing how they use him and where he gets on the field.
I think he plays. So I guess to start answering the question for myself, Will Johnson, I'm going to go with Amir Hall. The Michigan fans know I freaking love Amir Hall. I think coming over from Albany, very similar Josh Wallace vibes, this veteran cornerback that has played a ton of football, has played at a high level, quite frankly, after diving into some Albany football. I think Amir Hall athletically is a little bit more gifted than Josh Wallace. So I think Amir Hall is your boundary. And again, Jair Hill as a cornerback 3, feel good. Feel good about that. Safeties, Makari Page, Jaden Mangum, for the exact reasons you said. The nickelback, it's going to be a competition between Zeke Berry and Jaden McBurrows. I think Jaden McBurrows gives you, the higher floor. Like, we kind of know he's going to be a damn good nickel if he's our starter. I think Zeke Berry's that, dude, he's that wild card. Like, he's a phenomenal athlete that I think operates in the box well. I don't know if Zeke Berry starts for Michigan. I would be very surprised if he doesn't play a prominent role in this Michigan defense, whether it's as a box safety, whether it's at that nickel spot. I personally really do like his skill set at the nickel. That's my kind of projection. Again, so many different recipes that you can include with this. Those are some of our answers. Would love to hear from you guys in the comment section. Again, appreciate y'all rocking with it until we went pretty long, almost 20 minutes. Appreciate y'all rocking with it again. Would love to hear from you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.